preparing. Okay, I think we're live. So I just want to say a big welcome to anybody who is here to be with us this morning. What a day today is. It's a day when the kids have gone back to school. And I know that for many of us, that carries a really mixed bag of emotions. We aren't quite entirely sure how we feel about it, but there is a little bit of freedom. It's a day when, for the first time in months, we can sit on a bench with a friend and have a coffee, which again is another level of freedom, isn't it? But really importantly today, it's International Women's Day, a day when we get to celebrate women and to talk about freedom for women, to talk about ways in which we've managed to achieve some freedom, but to talk really importantly about ways in which we still need to find equality and to find freedom for women. So whoever you are, wherever you are, and whatever your situation, I just want to say welcome. Now, my name's Becca Legg, and I'm really proud to be the director of Restored, which is a Christian organisation speaking up about violence against women and equipping the church to stand against abuse and with survivors. Now, if you've stumbled across this by accident this afternoon, do visit our website later to find out more about what we do. It's restored-uk.org. But as I said, today is International Women's Day, and we wanted to take this opportunity to share one of our favourite women with you, and we're going to be sharing more over the course of the month. We probably shouldn't have favourites, but they definitely all really inspire us. Now, one of those ladies joining us today, and I can't tell you what an honour it is Dr. Anne-Marie Wilson, and she's come to join us today. So at Restored, we have a mission to change the story for women, and Anne-Marie has made it her life's mission to do just that. Anne-Marie has played a vital role in changing the story for women and girls at risk of the harmful tradition of FGM, female genital mutilation. Trained as a psychologist and with a background as a training consultant in the corporate world, as well as through her own not-for-profit consultancy, 10 years ago, Anne-Marie founded 28 Too Many, an organisation working to end FGM in countries all around the world. Anne-Marie, thank you so much for joining us. Did I get some of that blurb about you right?
It's always embarrassing, isn't it, to hear it about yourself? But yes, that's I'm absolutely right. And it's a good whistle-stop tour through my life.
Well, yeah, well, it is, and I have to acknowledge it's such a whistle-stop tour because you've done so much, and we'll only begin to, drop into little tiny bits of it today. But thank you so much for being with us. Now, I had the privilege of reading a final draft of your book back in January, and I got a little bit of a sneak peek into your life, and I really recommend it to anybody. But before we get any further, how can people get their hands on your book?
Yes, so that's a good plug, Becca, and it's lovely to have Restored behind me. You've been in my my organisation development from day one, literally. So I'm so privileged that both you and Mandy and Peter, the founders, all have given a little testimony or a little blurb on the back of the book. So that's wonderful to hear as well. So the book is being published on the 16th of June, which is the Day of the African Child, and that seemed an auspicious day, apart from today. A sort of momentous day, really, when so much of what we've done, it's not the FGM where I work, it's only in Africa, but it started there, and we try and eliminate it across Africa and all the places people settle and still practice. So 16th of June is publication date, but I think it'll be available earlier on Amazon and the pre-ordering and all of that sort of stuff, and it's called Overcoming, which seems a correct title for a bit of a summary of my life, really, in one word.
It really does, actually. Having read it and known you just a tiny bit, it's the perfect title, and we'll come back to that in just a moment. But for those of people who haven't met you, haven't read your book yet, because it's not out, so they can't, it's just good to have a little bit of background to who you are. Could you tell us a little bit about, where did you grow up? What was that like for you? What was,
Well, I grew up in a village, England, in Buckinghamshire, sort of one of those tiny little villages where nothing really ever happened. And I think my mum worked a little bit in a finance office, and my dad was in the Ministry of Defence, for a sort of secret job. And I went to a convent school, and then I went to a girls' high school. And mum and dad had both been Christians in their childhood, but actually, I think in the 60s, they thought, let's let her decide, let their only daughter decide herself, really. And so although I was christened, I wasn't sort of brought up as a Christian at home, but they sent me to a convent school, which was quite an interesting choice anyway. And of course there I quickly worked out I wanted what everybody else had. So I pestered my parents from 7 to take me to church, to Sunday school, and the rest is kind of history. And I kind of stayed as a Christian all the way through university. Deviated a bit off and married somebody Jewish in my middle era. So I've got Jewish sandwich in the middle of my life. So 20 odd years of Christian, then about 20 years of Jewish, and then back to being Christian again. So there you are, like a good eclectic mix.
Good eclectic mix, lots of experience there. And you know, your career and everything that you've done has taken you all around the world. Have you got a favorite country?
Oh, it's a difficult one. I think I love so many. I think I've got a soft spot for South Sudan because I worked there straight after I worked with Medair as a volunteer in the, I suppose, the early 2000s. And I suppose I remember it, Becca, because I was the happiest I've ever been in my life. I had the least, I had 3 pairs of trousers, 3 t-shirts, and I lived in a little hut that was actually used for baby foals, baby goats and stuff, really, normally, a little tuckle. But actually, I was so happy because I had no stress. And I think that was a good lesson to me. And it made me think, if ever I get unhappy in my life, all I need to do is change my environment, change something, and I know it will be okay again.
That's extraordinary, you know, and I think it's something, isn't it? So often we assume that having more stuff is going to make life better, but actually that is not the stuff that makes life okay, is it?
No, it's not.
No, which I think we've all learned a lot over this last year,
Exactly.
in all the you know, the loss of so much of what we think we should have and we feel entitled to, and many of us discovered actually some of that stuff wasn't as important as we thought. No, that's really helpful, thank you. So okay, so and also it's International Women's Day. Which women have inspired you, or are there anybody who's played any like pivotal roles in your life?
Well, I think in a biblical sense, I love the story of Esther. I mean, she is my role model, really. I just love everything about her. And as a Jewish woman reading her story in Purim every year, I think I got to love her as a role model. And she was that sort of she was a bride that was snatched and taken. She won a sort of beauty of her age of the sort. Was locked up. She stood up for her faith. She took risk. She endangered her life. So I suppose in a biblical context, she is my hero, really. I think in terms of others, I love Maya Angelou, who was an American poet. And I love one of the things she said. She was a US civil rights activist. She was actually born the same year as my mum. So I think she's like my alternative mum. And I think one of her quotes was sort of, people forget what you've said. They never forget what you did, and they never forget what you make them feel. So I try to remember that. That's important to me. And my other one, I suppose, just top of a very long list of women I love, was the Pankhurst family. And after Emmeline did what she did and standing up in the suffragette movement, but I also had the privilege of meeting Helen. Wow. And she spoke about her book when I spoke at an international conference a few years ago. But again, her book, Deeds Not Words, I think is very much mirrors what Maya Angelou says as well. And maybe that's a little bit about my sort of mantra. It's about doing, not just saying, make sure you actually walk the talk, really. Yeah. So they're a couple.
Oh, they're
and
great.
Esther.
Yeah,
there you are.
All great. I love Esther as well. But I think the thing about how you make people feel is so important, isn't it? And and at Restored, we kind of, and what you do as well, we kind of live in this world that looks at, actually some people can be incredibly charming and say all the right things, and they can do incredible good things, but actually that underlying thing underneath a lot of it is, but how are you left feeling at the end? Because that's what really counts, isn't it? At the end of the day, so. That's when you get to the nub of everything, because it can sound right and look right, but if it doesn't feel right, maybe it's worth having a bit of an explore. That's really helpful. I hadn't thought that. Thank you. Okay, total frippery now for a minute. If a film was made about your life, who would you choose to play you?
Gosh, who would I choose? Well, I think one of my film heroines is Helen Mirren. I love her strength. And I love the fact she stood up in lots of male environments, whatever she's played. I think it's who she is. Whatever she takes on, she does well. I know she's a bit older now, but she's just, and I think that as well, she's aged really well, and she's stayed in the sort of Hollywood glitz, really. And I think often in women in our society, we're put out to grass very early. You have to have the right coloured hair and the right coloured teeth and the right facelift and all that sort of stuff. And I think we're in a very sort of image conscious society, and she has aged with her profession, and she's brought all that richness to her. And that's one of my people I admire.
Yeah, I think she's good enough to play you as well.
There you are. There you are.
I'd let her do that. That would be a fair representation. Okay, well enough with those kind of questions for now. We'll move on to the important stuff, because you founded this incredible organisation, 28 Too Many, and I first came across that, quite, years ago when I was, editing a magazine, and we got to interview you and write an article about what you're doing. But perhaps you'd like to tell us a little bit about what it is and what inspired you to found this organisation.
Well, 28 Too Many was set up, I set it up I suppose I started the work in 2005, but set it up as a project in 2010 and as a charity in 2012. And initially we nested under Restored, so we were very grateful for that. We had some funding from New Wine Women's Day. I think 9,000 women came to hear and a women's conference, and they all gave £10, and we got £9,000, which was enough for us to start the charity. So that's how we were birthed. But I think it was really working with MEDA, a Christian relief and development charity. After I'd worked in South Sudan, I worked in West Darfur, where the wars and stuff were, and I met a little girl who'd had FGM at 5 and was raped at 10. And left for dead, actually, and her whole village was burned and razed to the ground. Everyone left for dead, and they thought that she was dead as well, but she wasn't. And she walked across the wilderness as a pregnant 10-year-old, and it made such an impact on my life. We gave her a safe delivery, and she was okay. And actually, I just couldn't get that story out of my head. It's like a little thorn of shard of glass had gone into my heart, and I thought, how can I leave these girls? And she was going to be moving to the other side of the country to marry, have an arranged marriage, but as a woman who was spoilt because of already not being a virgin, she would make a bad marriage, really. And I cried out to God and said, I was going home shortly after that, back on leave anyway, and I sort of cried out to God and said, well, who's going to look after these other girls? Because clearly she wasn't the only one. And it's the only time in my life I actually heard the voice of God saying, "You will." And it's like,
was it that deep?
Not me, surely not God. I'm white, I'm not a medic, I get burnt in the sun. It's like if I was God's HR department, I would be the last person I'd choose, because why would you choose me? I'd choose an African woman, and I'd choose somebody that had got medical background or something like that. But if you do hear from God, I think that calling is strong enough. A word from God, it's like, okay. And I've always thought of Jonah trying to run the other way, and it was just in the end God got him anyway. So I thought, let's just go with dignity and go the first time of asking, really.
No fish needed, it's fine.
yeah, exactly. Less belly of the whale stuff, really. So I went home, told my church, this is what I'm called to do. I think they were a bit horrified, really, and said, oh, I don't think so. And I thought, well, actually, I think this is what I'm going to do. So somehow they kind of supported me through sort of what was effectively a 7-year apprenticeship. As I retrained, I went to Pakistan and learned how to birth babies, actually, which was that would probably be my most fulfilling thing I've ever done in my life, as opposed to the most exciting place I've ever lived. And that was in northern Pakistan. And also then went up to work in northern Nigeria and helped run a fistula rehabilitation centre, which was for women who become incontinent, often from the combination of forced marriage and I suppose early childbirth, really. Childbirth at a very young age as well, really. So I suppose that's how we started. And the reason for it was, that was the reason for it. And I think it was just the idea. I roamed around a bit of Africa for a couple of years, retraining and working out what to do. What was the key element that I could make a difference with? Because I'm not African, I'm not in Africa. It doesn't happen to my traditional people group. So what difference could I make? And I thought, as a white woman, I've got to be careful not to try and take on a role that isn't mine. So I thought, actually, the one thing I could do was to provide really good quality information that would be useful for everybody, from the grassroots to the UN, and anyone in between. And that's what we've done, and that's what we've made a name for ourselves doing, I suppose, and that's what people rely on now.
And so then that information is used how? What does that look like?
Well, it's used by the community-based organisations on the ground, faith-based organisations and all others. It's also used by the UN and UNICEF and other bodies like that. It's used by governments. So activists lobby the governments to get laws changed in countries, and governments use it to actually decide where to put their efforts. And funders use it to decide where funding should be used that will make actually a difference. So the good thing is it pushes the issue from both sides of the, like two pincers really, from the bottom up and the top down. And actually we've seen that in the last few years, I mean, the most exciting thing is a law change in Somalia against FGM, which is really good because it's one of the highest, or around the 99% percentile there, of girls who are cut. And in Sudan, where I was, of course, it's a cyclical story to see that the little girl I met at 10 would now be 15 years on. And I've done all this sort of journeying around type stuff. She would be 25. Her daughter would be 15 and her granddaughter would be 5. So the idea would be that hopefully this law change that happened a year or so ago with our research, those two ones I know have changed the government's views and implemented the law properly, have actually changed the trajectory of the whole of those nations really. And that's doing not only the 28 country reports, that's why our name is 28 Too Many, 28 reports on those countries that practice it, but also law reports on each of those countries as well, and that makes a massive difference.
Oh yeah, it's such incredible work, and you've had such, you know, for a lady who sat and thought, well gosh, who am I to be doing this, you've had such extraordinary influence actually to reach into those government levels, you know, and to achieve so much. And I think it's really easy for those of us who sit here listening to go, goodness me, what an extraordinary woman. And you're like, you know, what a superhero. And you know, clearly the doors just keep opening in front of you. And this is all amazing. And aren't you fortunate to be able to do all of this? But the reality is that these things never come without a cost, do they? And actually, it's not just about green pastures and sunshine and the rest. What has the cost of this looked like to you as you've set about following what God called you to do?
Well, I think interestingly, I lost both my parents in my 20s, and I think that made me. I don't have siblings, and I don't have much family around me, so it's like as a single unit. I'd done my carer responsibilities early, and I think maybe God knew that then I could get going and do something. But I think I did meet somebody just before I was going out on my first mission trip who was very keen and wanted to marry me, and sort of said, well, I've decided I want to marry you anyway. And I said, well, I'm just off to South Sudan. You know, it's not as easy as that really. So I went on my trip and we corresponded. But those days, you know, there were no cell phones, and the aeroplane came in every month or so with supplies and the odd letter and stuff. But he got a job offer as a pastor, and I got a job offer to go back again. And I came back and we talked about it, but I think he wasn't well enough to come out with me. And I looked at the options and thought, actually, I don't think I can say no to God. I just think I have to do this. And he said, well, I'll wait for you till you retire, which was all very lovely. Yeah. And then a few years ago, he had a heart condition from rheumatic fever as a child. And he actually, the night I'd just gone to see him in hospital and decided, you know what, let's forget all this nonsense. Let's just get married now. I can commute from Brighton, or I can do it differently now. I've done the major parts of my work. And the next week, a couple of days later, he got offered a heart that night, and he died on the operating theatre.
Wow.
And it's like, just when I was going to have my second try at getting together with this man, he was taken from me. And he said to his son that night, you know, either I'll be married with Anne-Marie, doing her work, or I'll be in heaven with Jesus. And it's like heaven won. So, you know, that's one big cost, really. I've stayed single. The only redeeming factor is that some of my work enabling me to learn how to birth babies in Pakistan and Nigeria. I've got 10 babies to my name, really. I know it's really the mothers that birth babies, but I was there.
I think you can.
I feel they're my babies. It makes being single not so difficult, because it feels I've been fulfilled that woman's part as well, really. And I think the other part is that of my story is that I got diagnosed with late stage cancer 5 and a bit years ago. And I think almost all my peers have just stopped work. They've got husbands or partners that say, it's time to check out, let's go and enjoy ourselves, do the world cruise tour or whatever. But I don't have that reason. And I feel, again, it's very difficult to say no to the work and no to the calling. So I've carried on despite, but I am losing my friends quite quickly. And I think that's quite a high price to have paid, really, to fulfill my calling.
It's an extraordinary high price to have paid. And, you know, I just think on behalf of anybody and everybody who's listening, thank you for what you've done. And on behalf of just the hundreds and thousands of, and hundreds of thousands of women's lives that you will change, and you will have changed the story for them, you know, big fat thank you, because it's extraordinary. And, you know, but I knew that it'd been costly, and I wanted people to hear, because I think, you know, sometimes we look at people and we almost envy what they've been able to achieve, but actually the reality is that we may never want to pay that kind of cost. We might not be prepared to make the sacrifice it takes to be able to do what you've done. And I really just want to honour you, I think, in the midst of it, for all you've given, and as well as for all you've achieved, because the two go hand in hand, don't they? And I think it's really important for people to realise that, you know, and it takes great courage to be able to give so selflessly and to be able to do all of that. And I think courage is a word that if I were called upon to think of a word for Anne-Marie Wilson, courage would be one of them. And not just because of all that you've given up, but because of all that you've gone through. You've been, you know, Ken, reading your book, knowing your story, you've been in some really, really, like, frankly, downright dangerous situations. When have you, I wonder if you could tell us when you felt most afraid, and how you've been able to get through those and just keep going with all that you've done.
I think some is a bit of sort of, I look quite a non-threatening, like small petite female type thing, really, and butter wouldn't melt type thing, but I've got quite a feisty bit inside me, really. And I think there was one time in South Sudan when I was walking between the lunch hut in the village and back to my classroom, and we had the chief of the county, which is a really big area. It's like the whole south of England sort of area. He was on my course, and I was teaching leadership out there. And I met his driver, and he got this big Kalashnikov gun, and he said to me, "Would you like to see my weapon?" You know. I wasn't really quite sure how to respond on various levels, but yeah. I was alone in the bush, really, basically. And I just kind of said, oh, actually, I used to fire one of them. I was in the officer training corps with the King's Regiment. Nice. And whatever was on his mind, I'll never know to this day, of course, whatever was on his day. And he kind of saluted me and left me to it, really. And on I went, really. And I think that was a bit of a near escape. And then I think I worked in northern Nigeria, and that was quite a scary time as well. I was the only Christian up there. It was up in the area where we know that Boko Haram works and that sort of stuff, really. And actually, I don't think I realised how dangerous it was, a place I was going to before I went. And instead of being in the town centre in a hotel, which is what I was thinking, I was up in the middle of nowhere, really. And I was doing okay to start with. I was in a sort of a flat apartment, and on the other side of the staircase was the office, and there was a big metal gate, like a big garage door, locked. And so I was then up my staircase, through the front door, into my area, through another locked door into my bedroom and bathroom area. But one day I was having a bath, and somebody was knocking on the door downstairs. So I went out, wrapped myself in a towel, went outside, went to the dining room windows to look down and just say the farm colleague, who was my sort of chaperone, was coming back later. But there in the middle of my sitting room was this enormous man, really, about, I don't know how many kilos, but like about 4 times my volume, I reckoned. And, you know, in that sort of area, under Sharia law, you're not allowed to have a man in your house alone. I was unchaperoned, and it would be assumed that I had wooed him off his marriage vows, and the rest is history, really. And, you know, women get stoned to death out there, or buried alive in a pit, you know, so it's pretty awful, really. But I was so horrified, I couldn't really compute what was going on, because I thought, how's he walked through 3 locked doors, is the bottom line. So I kind of said to him, what do you do in my house? Get out of my house. And I shooed him out like a chicken, really. and then locked all the doors behind him.
That's
And I
quite
think he was so
visual.
surprised. Yeah, literally shooed him out like that. And I think he was surprised to see so much white flesh.
Yeah.
He was not, he was a bit shocked as well. So I just got there quickly enough, and then I don't know what protected me. I don't know whether there's a host of angels around me. I can't superly spiritualize and say the angels came down and protected me, but somehow I was protected, and I locked the door, and that the rest was history, really. And that something happened similarly to that a couple of weeks later, and it really messed with my head. A football team sort of came into my compound, and it's like, oh gosh, Lord, get me out. And I would literally pray for protection every day. When I opened my eyes, I think I am still alive. I have my word for the day, UCB word for the day, and it's like, okay, I'm still alive. And it's like a little ticking off the days till my assignment was over. But I decided it was more dangerous to raise the alarm and go early, because they would wonder why.
Yeah.
And so I just decided I'd sit it out, really.
Get to the other end. It's just extraordinary, and it makes you realise, doesn't it, that when you haven't got your stuff, and when you're out in the middle of nowhere, and there's nothing else is going to protect you, it makes you develop. It makes your faith grow in a way that nothing else ever really
does.
can.
It does. It absolutely does.
Yeah. And most of us will never experience that in any shape or form. But yeah, just extraordinary. And people really should now go out and pre-order your book to read the rest of the story. So with all of that that's gone on, and all of that, we're here in 2021 at the end of a year of coronavirus, pandemic, and the rest. And I think one of the things that we know from the world, we know from the news and from everything else, is that violence against women hasn't gone away. And there are stories actually that this pandemic has put some of the progress back. What does that look like in your world? What does that mean for you as an organisation, but also for the work to end FGM?
I think for us as an organisation, it's been fairly dire because I don't go out. I mean, actually, this time last year, the 7th of yesterday, was a year to the day from when I was being locked in my house, shielded. So I was on my way to New York, and the flights were cancelled for going out to the UN Commission on the Status of the Women, and I'm not. And this year I'm doing it on Zoom. So, it's a whole different world, really. But actually, from first quarter last year, at the end of June, when we looked at our results, our income, our gift giving was down a quarter. I thought, oh my gosh, that's a lot in just 3 months, really. Will we even make it to the end of the year? So I set a campaign to do something called, it's #challenge28, and it's on our website, or you just put that in and you find it, really. But I for my part, am doing 28 minutes of cycling on a static bike, and I've been doing that for 28 weeks, so that's 6 months.
Very good.
So I've been doing that since September, attached to my backside attached to my static bike every day. So that is to try and raise money. And actually, we are only about £3,000 off our target. We need to get 28,000 really to make it, and we're about on 10.5 at the moment. If we get to 14, we will get match funding to 28. So we're so near.
Oh, you are.
That time is ticking. So I'm hoping that will come off. So that's organisational.
So if someone's listening and they think, I'd really like to contribute to that 3,500, they can go to your website and find details.
Exactly. 28toomany.org, and they will just find on the donate page the whole page of Challenge 28. So.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. So let's go. Carry on. No. I was just going to say, I'm really aware that I've probably got something in the background going, Becca's talked for too long, or Becca's kept asking questions. Well, no, I'm going to let you keep speaking, but I want to make sure people know that if they're listening and they want to ask questions, to put those on the Facebook page, and then they'll get sent through to me and I'll ask you. But anything last that you'd like to tell us before we go over to questions from the people who...
Well, I suppose just the last thing was for me, for pandemic and for FGM. So I work in the work of violence against women generally. So I work in my church against domestic abuse. I'm a survivor of domestic abuse as well. So Restored's work is very close to my heart as well. And also FGM has certainly gone backwards. We know that more girls are being cut around the world because for economic gain and stuff, to save the mouths to feed and all that sort of stuff. And our work carries on, but the work of we're not being able to go on the ground and do any more research on the ground at the moment because all the flights are cancelled.
Just whilst you said that makes me want to ask a question, because I wonder if anybody listening might want to ask it as well. It's when you say that for economic gain, there's been more FGM. What can you explain why FGM is connected to economics?
Yeah, well, a girl, so let's say a girl of 10 would have been in school, and actually, if the family thinks she's going to be educated and can be good, be a useful contributor and economically viable, then she might stay in school. But otherwise, in the current climate, she'll be pulled out of school, married off, have FGM, married off, and that's one less mouth to feed. And the money of the dowry will bring income into the family.
Gosh, it's, you know, the story that you told at the beginning, it's, you know, it's like a little shard of glass in anybody's heart, I think, who hears it. I can't imagine witnessing it. But the thought that parents are so impoverished that
Yeah,
that feels possible, let alone necessary, is so hard to
exactly.
imagine, isn't it? And I guess that's why what you're doing is so important, that you can, and then it has to all be part of a bigger package, because it's not enough to say this isn't a nice thing to do, is it? It's about
No,
saying, well, we have to find other solutions for the problems that create this in the first place.
I think so. We work with Child Abuse Linked with Faith and Belief, CAL FB, and we work with the Met Police as well on giving him expert advice every couple of weeks or so to make sure that the knowledge is shared. People do FGM they often have the best of reasons at heart, yet the implications on childbirth and early death and miscarriage, all sorts of things like that, is dire, and they don't always know the correlation of the two. So we try to inform and protect and prevent.
So here's a question that just about what's going on and the situation. So we think of this, I mean, I think it's very easy to think of this as a problem that's in other countries. And you talked about Africa and the 28 countries where it's the traditional culture. But what does that actually look like in the UK? For most, I would imagine most people listening are UK based. So what does that look like in the UK? How big a problem is it in this country?
We know it's there, and we know it's bigger than we know, but it's very difficult for young girls to testify against their parents. There's been one case where it's convicted, and it was a young girl of 3 that had FGM, and she was 4 when she gave her information. She just, I think in the court case it says the witch came to visit me, which says a lot, really. So that was definitely FGM linked to witchcraft as well, which of course it's African practices, really. We know that it happens. It used to happen where girls were taken in and out of the country in the long summer holidays. We then knew that it was taken to some intermediate countries, maybe Singapore or Hong Kong or Dubai, where girls will be cut. We know there's medicalization in some places, the Maldives and others. We know it happens in Indonesia and other places. We know it happens in a different, a lesser than the very extreme type in the Indian Bora people on the India-Pakistan borders. So and the thing is, Becca, that people come from those countries and then sometimes want to carry on that practice, or they take their daughters back home for a summer holiday, and somebody in the village or a grandma or an auntie think it's important to sort out that girl.
Yeah. So do you think then at some level pandemic may have protected some of those girls because they haven't been able to travel?
Well, I think that's possible, but I think instead of protecting them from flying somewhere to get it done, they would be happening here. So I think it's going on behind closed doors. Yeah. But the difficulty at the moment is that social workers can't just get into houses because COVID isn't as a reason to not have access. And there's no normal checks and balances on child protection, where children who would be in a risky group might be kept an eye on by teachers because they're not in schools.
It's why it's good they've gone back today, isn't it, actually? Because it does, it's some of the things we don't think about in the midst of everything else that we are going on behind.
I think so. I think from a general domestic abuse profile, apart from mental health, it's good that they're back.
So we've had some more questions about that, actually. So what can we do practically in the UK? So here's a few questions. I'll put them all together, actually, because I think they'd be quite helpful. They're all around the same theme. So how can we better protect girls here, and what can we do practically, and how can individuals campaign, and are churches doing anything? So there's a whole bunch of things there, but they're all kind of around the same topic, really. So I guess you could probably answer them together generally, and then maybe the bit about churches is good too.
Yeah, maybe prompt me if I forget the other bits, because I remember a bit of it, really. So I think how can we protect? Well, I think it's a case of we know that the law here is protecting girls in this country, and all mothers who've got children at risk will be asked at a midwifery appointment what's happening. So one of our previous research managers was married to somebody from Sierra Leone, and she was asked at the clinic appointment, and she was so delighted. She said, "Oh, you've never made me so happy. I'm so glad you asked." So things like that will protect and prevent, really. And the law is on the side, but it's a case of knowledge, really. If you have any reason to know that you have neighbours who might learn more, I'd say, would be the first thing. All our reports are free and downloadable on our website. There's even on an app now you can get. So everything is available, and share them with people you think it might be relevant to. Be informed yourself, I would say, as a citizen. That's a citizen useful thing.
It's always a really good place to start, isn't it?
Yeah. And from a church perspective, or your church has got safeguarding that covers FGM in its child protection guidelines as well. So make sure that when you've got child Sunday school, you know, all the guidelines should include FGM as well. I would say that's two definite things.
And I think that's a really good one. It's a good challenge, isn't it? Because sometimes if you're the safeguarding officer putting together all your policies and you look around your church, you might go, this is not an issue for us. But of course, you don't know who's going to come through your door next. You don't know who's going to come into your kids' clubs, your breakfast clubs, or anything else, is it? It's really important to have that on everyone's radar. More questions. People have got suddenly, they're all coming now. Actually, if somebody wants to campaign as an individual, can they do that through 28 Too Many?
Yes. Just email us, info@or admin@28toomany.org, and we'll help them. But yes, they can individually do it. Write to your MPs, check what's going on in your area, campaign to get disclosure information in Parliament.
That's brilliant. Okay,
and all of those are good.
And then a question here more about you. So, Inessa, this is about your training and development after hearing God's call. How did you keep going? How did you maintain your focus? And how did you, it says here, how did you prevent doubt? But I wonder actually if it's how did you overcome those, because I don't think we can we? But how did you overcome those moments you must have had moments of doubt?
Should I have moments of doubt? What, I was doing the right thing?
Oh, well, no, I guess just to answer that however you are, I shouldn't speak for you, really. I always have moments, no matter how much I think I'm called, I have moments to go, I can't do this, possibly, it's impossible, I'm going to have to go and hide under a sheet somewhere.
I don't know. I think for me, I was so clearly called. I don't think I did have much doubt, actually. It might make me sound really weird. But actually, it was other people's concerns and doubts I had to overcome. So my colleagues were not necessarily in the same place as me all the time. So when I wanted to take risky things with campaigns, or risky things with, moving into new things or accepting donations from other people wouldn't necessarily agree with me. And I think that's the challenge for me, how to listening to the voices, but also when I was convinced that we should do what we should do, how do you bring people along with you at a decent pace?
And how did you do that?
Well, I'd love to say graciously. I'm sure they would probably write their book and say not at all, really. I think it's quite challenging, actually, as a pioneer. And I realise I am a pioneer. I probably have always been a pioneer, outgrowing my little village pond. At 16, I left school and went to work because the village pond was too small for me. Really. I'd seen the Druids and the 60s people at Stonehenge, and I thought, I want to be a part of that, really. And I went to work in London, which was just unheard of from my village life, really. But I think if you pioneer, and I think pioneering is very like entrepreneurial, and I think that's in my genes and in my life, really. But I think the danger is how do you do that in established norms, so in your own organizational culture, how do you do it in the church? That's a very big question. And how do you do it in areas you want to influence, whether it's the police or the judiciary or the law? That's a very interesting question that I still grapple with.
Yeah, it's quite something, isn't it? And actually, I guess it's what leadership is, isn't it? Is that ability to better take people with you and help them, even when you're 4 or 5 steps ahead, to be able to,
I think so,
to keep going behind you.
And I think just one thing, I mean, it's like probably not, it just popped into my mind, but when you really know you're in the right place, despite, I went out to Rome a couple of years ago to a conference, and I wrote to the Pope to see if I could go and see him. And you know, trying to see the Pope, it's like you and 20,000 people. And I don't think I realised he would be so popular, really. But I had got a golden ticket, but I hadn't got it at the right gate. You know, it's very, very complicated. You have to fax them, and it's a whole different palaver, really, to get these things. So when I was kind of thinking it's time to go, I looked up to heaven and thought, you know, when they dropped the paraplegic through the roof, I thought, this is the story that came to mind. And it's like my feet wouldn't budge. And so I queued up, not even knowing if the Pope would come out the same way as he went in. But I was one of 4 people that held his hand. Only 4 people he even like touched, you know, on that day. It's interesting, isn't it, really?
Yeah. Gosh, what a, you know, just extraordinary. Your whole life has been extraordinary and continues to be. And what you've done,
it's a bit of a whirl.
Yeah, and yet you've just, you know, you've made such a difference, and you've changed the story, and it continues to change, and it continues to change for women. And you know, and in the midst of all of that, Anne-Marie, I'm just going to ask you one last question. How can we pray for you and for 28 Too Many?
Oh, that's really kind. Well, I think for 28 Too Many to make it and to carry on doing this in my lifetime and beyond would be my prayer there. I'm trying to focus on legacy building now. I always said I'd run 28 Too Many for 10 years to make a 10% difference in 10 countries in 10 years. And we have done that. And I think as a founder, having done this from sort of 2012 to 2022, it is in sight. It's now the board is thinking, well, what next, really? And also with my health, which is obviously not the best it could be, to just pray I have as long a time as possible on this earth. I'm quite happy to go meet Jesus if I want. I've done all my end of life stuff, but I've got lots of things I'm still enjoying doing. I'm a hospice chaplain, and I've just got a new exciting role with my church doing anti-domestic abuse and pastoral work and stuff. And I want to do all these things, really. I think that's what my life is all about, really. I was trying to think, have I got the right balance? You know, should I be just sitting doing knitting or crochet or something? Nothing wrong with those, but actually these are the things that excite me. So I think it's just what I want to do, really. So I think that's probably those 2 prayers. And also for my team worked really hard. There's 10 of us all around the world. We've got Tanzania and Melbourne and Australia and Kenya amongst the UK, the rest across the UK, and just so that we can do what we need to do as long as we're needed, and then when we're not, we know that we're done. But I don't think we're there yet.
No. Oh, well, do you know what, Emma, it's been such a privilege to have you come and speak to us. Thank you so much. I'll sign us off in just a tick, but if people want to find out more about the work that you're doing, where can they find that? Just look on our website,
28toomany.org. There's a whole resources page there. We've got training books and resources and free downloadables for people going overseas to work and stuff as well. But just get people to email me, you know, either there's an admin @ or there's an info @ or my email is annemarie@28toomany.org, any of those, and just ask their questions and we'll sort them out in the right direction. Because I would love that people, the listeners today, the people watching and listening today, can engage and become little mini me's, because I can't get around the whole planet. I do my best, but you know, I think if I can make a whole generation of people aiming to help this, then it will end in our lifetime.
That's brilliant. Anne-Marie, thank you so much for joining us. You've been absolutely
Thank you, Becca. Thank you to Restored for having me. It's been an absolute privilege.
Thank you.